Genesis 14. So uh, starts off with a story that is going to bring on my laser point. Uh, Story of Lot getting captured, basically, right? Lot went off to live near Sodom. Abram settled a little bit further away, and a couple of kings all get together. They're fighting with each other, 4 on 5. Um, and eventually, anyways, Lot gets taken away, him and his belongings and goods, as well as his people, right? So that's this section. And then basically what happens is Abram goes and gets him. Sorry, at the end of this line, um, it says that Abram pursued them, and he basically took them at night, defeated them, pursued them for a while, and he brought back all of the goods and Lot and his goods. So basically, what those kings had stolen, uh, Abram takes and brings back. So that's interesting. But where it really gets interesting is the second half of this chapter. So he returned from defeating the kings, and King Sodom went out to meet him. And Melchizedek, king of Salem, brought out the bread and wine. He was a priest to the God Most High. So this is sort of one of the most fascinating. I said earlier, there's an awful lot about Enoch written outside of the Bible that influences things and influences a lot of the thought. I would say Melchizedek is probably the second most written about for such a short section. This is the whole section here, right? But it does bleed over. So what basically before Moses, before the Aaronic, meaning coming from Aaron, priesthood is set up, we have a priest to the Most High God who is also a king. So and the naming and the wording. So Melchizedek, it could be translated the King of Righteousness, which is how it's translated in Hebrews. He's mentioned in Hebrews, and it says righteousness, King of Righteousness, and also King of, and it interprets this Salem as it's got the same consonant as Shalom, so peace, which are both perfectly acceptable translations as I understand them. It could also be a couple of other things. So this Salem could be Jerusalem. That he's king of Jerusalem, and many believe that the Melchizedek Zedek. It's actually pronounced differently in Hebrew, Zedek or whatever, however you do it. Was a god of justice, righteousness. So some people are wondering if he's sort of this god from this king from another god that basically is somehow pulled into all of this. It's there's lots and lots of stories. But what happens is this priest king comes out of nowhere and brings out the bread and wine. Um, and he blesses Abram. Abram is blessed by God Most High, creator of heaven and earth, and blessed be God Most High, who has handed over your enemies to you. And Abram gave him a tenth. So eventually, once the law is set up, there will be tithing a tenth to the priesthood, right? So before this all happens, you have this situation where a king priest of the God Most High comes out of nowhere, blesses Abram, and Abram tithes to him as if he's part of that priesthood. And then you finish the story, right? Basically, the king of Sodom says, hey, by the way, you can keep that or whatever, and everything that you found. And Abram says, no, 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 I don't want to be made by another man. So that's how the chapter sort of ends. Interesting, right? Well, who is this guy, right? How does this Melchizedek come out of nowhere as a king and a priest of the God Most High and then just pop in and disappear? So much like the Enoch story, there is much written about it. I listened to about 3 to 4 hours of podcasts on Melchizedek this week, just chasing that rabbit hole. Because what happens is in Psalm 110, what it does is it connects this Melchizedek as a priest and king with David and more appropriately the Messiah. It says that the Messiah is going to be a king and a priest like Melchizedek. Then in Hebrews, so this is after the intertestamental period, so after Second Temple or in Second Temple time. the writer of Hebrews expands on this a lot. Uh, and basically what he expands on is he says, look, this guy comes out of nowhere. He has no lineage, no family, no anything, which means, according to, later writings, that he couldn't be part of the Levitical process. And that's what he's just saying. Like, obviously, this guy was born before. He doesn't have this Levitical background. God just says, you're going to be a king and a priest, right? And therefore, he appears sort of out of nowhere, appointed by God, so that when Jesus comes, that is a type of what Jesus is going to be, because Jesus is going to come back and basically bring back the combined office of both king and mediator, right? So he is the king and he is also the mediator to God. Jesus sort of restores that. And that's what's predicted in Psalm 110. And that's what he talks about in Hebrews chapter 7 as he goes through the explanation that Jesus is even better than the Levitical process because that Levitical stuff will all fade away and it was sort of instituted by man because it had to be. Whereas Jesus is going to be appointed as both the king and the priest, as he should have been, just like Melchizedek, who brought out, probably not coincidentally, the bread and wine as this typology of Jesus. So in the Second Temple, that time sort of between the Old Testament and the New Testament, there are all kinds of crazy writings about Melchizedek. So that predicted he's the same as, an angel and that he was, divine and that he was God and whatever else. And that probably influenced the guy, influenced Hebrews and the writing of Hebrews. But there's nowhere in Hebrews or in the text in the Old Testament that thinks that he needs to be divine in any way. He is basically a type. He's just sort of showing, just like Moses, just like Adam is a type. Adam is listed in Romans as a type of Jesus, right? Jesus comes and perfects what Adam was supposed to be. And Adam was meant to be this king and priest in one, right? The king and the intermediator. He was sort of set up as that typology. Melchizedek is there. And then what happens is, if you actually read into the account in Moses and Aaron, is it sort of says that the priesthood is kind of a concession. Like Moses keeps saying, but I can't do it, but I can't do it. And finally God says, all right, fine. We'll make this priesthood with Aaron that does it. And, it doesn't necessarily go well. Like within a couple of minutes, Aaron is making golden calves, right? So, but that whole story is reunited because it's meant to come back together so that our mediator and our king are in one. And this Melchizedek, despite the fact that this is the whole section on Melchizedek in the Old Testament, gets expanded on an awful lot in crazy writings, but also Psalm 110. And also, there's probably about a chapter, almost a chapter and a half in Hebrews that spends a lot of time on this. So despite the small mention, very important later on as you get through the story. After that, immediately after that, right, he meets Melchizedek. He is blessed by the priest and king of the Most High God. And immediately the Lord comes to Abram in a vision. Do not be afraid, Abram. I am your shield. Your reward will be very great, right? But Abram says, I don't have any heirs. How does that work, right? And the Lord came to him and said, don't worry, you're going to have an heir. You can go out and look at the stars in the sky, and your offspring will be that numerous, right? And then verse 6 is a good one. Abram believed the Lord, and he credited to him as righteousness. He, meaning God, credited to him as righteousness. That is a common thing that comes up in the New Testament. There's several places where this line specifically is mentioned, because what they're saying is, Abram believed God and then behaved and was obedient to God and saying, yes, you are God. I'm actually going to respond to that in faith that you are God, and I'm going to behave as if that is true, right? So it's not just yeah, okay, fine, I believe you, whatever, or some words or whatever. It is actual belief in God, and therefore I'm going to go off and behave in faith like what you say is true. And God credits that as righteousness. You are right with me because you're being obedient and you are behaving in faith that what I say is true and going off and doing that. Therefore, you are right with me, right? So that's an important line as it goes through. So then it goes a little bit longer, and basically God says, bring these animals, and then as the sun is setting, a deep sleep, same word that Adam falls into a deep sleep when his rib is taken out, comes over Abram, and a terror and darkness descends on him. And then he has this vision, right? Your offspring, the Lord talks to him and says, your offspring will be aliens for 400 years in a land that does not belong to them, right? So this is all the sort of Exodus story. They'll be enslaved and oppressed, but eventually I will judge that nation and they will go out and get their possessions, and life will be good in the land, right? Um, but the interesting part here is when the sun is set and it was dark, a smoking fire pot and a flaming torch. So that is an image of basically godliness. So that would have been understood to be God in this vision. All right. And the weird thing is the animals were divided. They were cut in half and laid out. In these covenants in this time in the ancient Near East, those would be laid out if you were a king, and someone was giving you a covenant, so they were giving you an oath of loyalty. They would walk between divided animals. And that symbology was basically, look, this is what's going to happen to you if you break this covenant. You're saying, I am willing to risk my life, risk, destruction, to give this covenant, and therefore I will remain faithful to it. So the interesting part is that's flipped here. It's God, the flaming pot and torch, that actually comes through. He's giving a covenant to us despite the fact we don't deserve it, right? That we should be, obviously, obedient and covenanting with him, which we are. But in this symbol, what he's saying is, I am actually reaching out to you as humans. To give you this promise. And he starts with Abram as the people of God, and then your descendants, and if you read the promises in chapter 12 and future refrains, it will say, and eventually all peoples will be blessed through this agreement, through this covenant that I'm giving with you. So that is, and it finishes with a big long list of what's going to happen, of all the peoples that you will have to kick out of the Holy Land, basically, in that section. So that is chapter 14 and 15. I know there's some rabbit holes that take you from here to the New Testament. So those are interesting stories and worth sort of bringing up now because you will hear about them later. So hope you enjoy your reading and be blessed.